I'm Stephanie from Back to the Passport. Today's travel vlog is going to be focusing on how we spent a weekend in New York City around Christmastime. One of our 2022 goals was to take a quick weekend trip with the credit card points that we'd racked up, and we made it happen in December last year by sneaking away to New York City for a long weekend to enjoy the Christmas festivities in the Big Apple. It was a wonderful trip, minus a small panic attack that we both had as the lift ride into the city was taking a lot longer than we expected it would. But everything worked out in the end. We just had to haul ass to make our dinner reservation. I was so excited to get back to New York City, as it had been about 7 years since both Rick and I went to New York City. Funnily enough, we hadn't gone together though. I went in April to visit a friend who was living there, and Rick went in June for a work conference. So we really wanted to explore the Big Apple together, and we both wanted the magical experience of seeing the city all lit up for the holidays. It was a win-win having the credit card points to cover our hotel and make it a rather affordable weekend getaway. So here was what we did on our long Christmassy weekend in New York City. We flew out on Thursday afternoon and arrived at LaGuardia at around 3:30 p.m. I'm going to admit, our ride from the airport to our hotel was a bit stressful, as we expected it to take about 30 to 45 minutes, and it ended up taking closer to 2 hours. We had about 15 minutes to check in, change, and then run off to our restaurant for our dinner reservation. Thank God we booked a restaurant that was just a few blocks away. So our dinner was at Boucherie, and I was in the mood for escargot and steak tartare. We had a great dinner, and we both ended up ordering duck-based dishes for our entrees, and both were great. Rick got duck confit, and I got the cassoulet, and then of course we paired it with some great Pinot Noir. The restaurant was packed, and it's easy to see why after we sat down and started gorging ourselves on the champagne-paced drinks and delicious French food. After dinner, we made a quick stop at the Plaza Hotel, because Home Alone 2, Lost in New York, is one of my favorite Christmas movies, so we simply had to stop at the Plaza Hotel, even just to peek inside. We were really hoping to stop at the bar for a drink, but it was packed, and we were, again, on a time crunch to get to Central Park for our next activity. I wish we would have had time to return there for a cocktail or two, but I am glad we at least got to see the inside of it, since we saw a lot of it as we explored the park. So next up on our itinerary was a carriage ride in Central Park and in the city. So we didn't go dashing through the snow in a one-horse open sleigh, but we did book a romantic Holiday Lights carriage ride through Central Park and then down Fifth Avenue to see the city all lit up for the holidays. Was it touristy as hell? Oh yeah, but it was great. Our guide was really great and pointed out all sorts of filming locations in the park, played us some great Christmas songs, and took fantastic photos of us on our trip around the park and down Fifth Avenue. It was everything I had hoped for, though I will say dress warm as it does get chilly, and we were given a blanket to cover our legs. Some of the highlights of our New York City carriage ride, of course, was the Holiday Lights. Kind of a given, as it was the Holiday Lights tour, but it was still really neat to see them from this vantage point and rolling down Fifth Avenue. We stopped in front of the Christmas tree at Rockefeller Center and enjoyed a few minutes of the Saks Fifth Avenue light show with the best seat in the house. We also got a bonus film locations tour as we rolled through Central Park. Our guide, Emra, pointed out all the spots from famous movies, particularly the filming locations of Home Alone 2. We also passed the ice skating rink where Marv and Harry planned their heist, the bridge with the pigeon lady, and then we went past the Plaza Hotel. We knew where we had to return to the next day when we walked through the park to get a closer view of these filming sites. Our tour was an hour, and it was the perfect amount of time to enjoy the ride and the views, all while snuggling up with Rick. After our tour, even though we did see the Christmas tree at Rockefeller Center on our carriage ride, I wanted a closer look, so we went back to Rockefeller Center to see the tree and then watch the light show at Saks from ground level. We debated going ice skating at Rockefeller Center, but it was a bit spendy for something we can always do at home, though maybe next time we would shell out the cash and get out on the ice. On Friday, we started the morning with breakfast at the popular Carnegie Diner and Cafe. While we didn't get the giant pastrami sandwiches nor the 24-layer chocolate cake, we did get pancakes and waffles and mimosas. The food was fantastic. The service, super quick, and it definitely fueled us up for our long jaunt through Central Park. To burn off all that food we ate, we spent our first full day in New York City by taking a little, or long, stroll in the park. Central Park, that is. I was truly blown away by how much it looked like fall still in the park. There were leaves on the ground, golden leaves still on the trees, and it just felt like an interesting mix between fall and Christmas for early in December. We had no other plans for our morning, so we were able to simply wander and see what we came across during our walk. If we had added a bit more time to our exploration of Central Park, we would have added time to visit the Met, but we know that for next time now. Then we went back to our hotel to get ready for dinner, and before heading off for dinner, we enjoyed the Christmas market and bright lights of Times Square. It wasn't as packed as we expected, though we were there at like 4 p.m., which might have helped thin the crowds. The markets were cute, and we checked out the stalls selling ornaments, clothing, and of course, delicious smelling food, which we would have sampled if we didn't have early dinner plans. So we ended up having dinner at Boqueria because we love tapas and sangria. So we made dinner reservations at Boqueria to get our fill before sitting for almost 4 hours at our Broadway show. We were lucky that our reservation was early as we timed it with happy hour. So we started with some cava before sampling a variety of their sangrias. Their traditional red was fabulous, but their seasonal apple cider was also amazing. And we paired it with a variety of tapas like pan con tomate, manchego cheese, jamón ibérico, croquettes, and paella. Everything we had was wonderful, and I would return in a heartbeat. That night, we had tickets to Harry Potter and the Cursed Child on Broadway. As a proud Slytherin, we made our way there early to get our cocktails and something from the gift shop. The show was great, but it is long. It's about 3 hours and 30 minutes. But it was a very nostalgic show, and the special effects were mind-blowing, and, to put it bluntly, practically magical. On our second full day in New York City, so Saturday, we had express pass tickets to the observation deck at Rockefeller Center. I will definitely recommend this option as the line was crazy long. We were able to get right up to the top right away. The view was supremely impressive, and I love seeing the city from that view, as last time I was in New York, we didn't have any time to visit an observation deck, and I absolutely love aerial views of any city I travel to. After taking in the views and standing around in the wind, it was time to eat. Being in New York City, we had to get a few of the iconic foods, and so we found a pizza shop near Rockefeller Center and popped in for a few slices and some garlic knots. Funnily enough, Santa came in as well for a quick bite for lunch. It would have been good to know that the weekend we picked was SantaCon in the city, as we were seeing Santas everywhere. We had also stopped at Magnolia Bakery, as I love banana pudding and have heard about the banana pudding available here, and we opted for their seasonal special that featured red velvet. It was quite tasty and well worth the wait in the line at the bakery. After lunch, we took the subway over to Brooklyn to walk the Brooklyn Bridge back to New York City. This was one thing on my list of must-dos for this trip to New York City, and I'm glad we were able to make it happen. It was very easy getting to Brooklyn, and there's a stop that practically drops you off at the steps to the bridge. Once back on the New York City side, we strolled around and just enjoyed the sightseeing we came across on our own. We walked down Wall Street, stopped in front of Trinity Church, saw the Bull, and then continued on to Battery Park. We took a quick stop at Battery Park to see Lady Liberty, as we didn't want to visit the island on this trip. I've done it in the past with friends, and Rick preferred to spend our time together doing things other than riding the ferry out to the islands of Liberty Island and Ellis Island. Maybe if we return in the spring or summer, or fall, we'll go pay her a visit. We wound our way back into the city and stopped to pay our respects at One World Trade Center. I've done the 9/11 Memorial Museum with my friends, but even just standing at the sites of the towers was very sobering, and it's well worth a visit if you have the time to visit the museum. That evening, we met up with some friends that live in the city for dinner at Negril Village, a Jamaican restaurant in Greenwich Village. I was quite excited for this as we love going to Jamaica and had gone for Christmas 2 years ago. It was a fun way to relive that trip and dine on some of our favorite dishes. We did bring our own rum, as the restaurant was operating on a BYOS, or bring your own spirits, and had it mixed into a rum punch. And then we started with some cornbread, jerked wings, and then I was so excited to dig into my plate of ackee and saltfish with festival and plantains. After our dinner with friends, it was off to hear some spooky stories about the village on a haunted pub crawl of Greenwich Village. We stopped at some iconic places like the Stonewall Inn and heard about the history of the city, the neighborhood, and a few ghosts who still call it home. Our ghost tour was booked with the NYC Booze and Booze, so BOOS and BOOZE, haunted pub crawl with NYC ghosts. Funnily enough, we were the only ones booked on the tour, so it felt like a private tour. Like I said, this was a haunted pub tour of the village, so obviously LGBTQIA+ history was covered on this tour, as well as some haunted history. We stopped at 2 bars where we went in for drinks, which are not included in the ticket price, and then the tour ended at a final pub, but we opted to head back to our hotel instead of popping in for a drink. I will say that I'm not quite sure how this tour would work if there had been more than 15 people booked on it, as many of the bars were crowded and we could barely find room for the 3 of us to stand. It wasn't quite like other haunted pub crawls where we've had our own reserved space or pre-made drinks ready. To be honest, this tour was a bit awkward, and when we were at the bars, I expected to hear a few ghost stories or more history of the neighborhood, but we kind of just ended up talking about other things. Not the usual experience I've had on ghost tours, but we made it work. I will say also that this tour is obviously geared more towards those that want the pub crawl portion of the experience and not so much the haunted part. I would be really curious to compare this to their regular ghost tour to this one and see if that would have been a better fit for us, but this was the option that was available for our free night in the city. Some of the highlights of our ghost tour in New York City was the Stonewall Inn. Though we didn't hear any ghostly stories here, we did hear about its history and enjoyed a drink at the famous landmark. We stopped at 12 Gay Street, where we heard stories about tapping sounds to a man's screams, and hearing about how this was the mayor's former speakeasy and how it's haunted and serves as a home to several ghosts. We also stopped at the 86 Speakeasy, and it was a place that famous authors would visit and is actually the origin of the term 86th. And then lastly, we stopped at 1 if by land, 2 if by sea, and now this place is a pretty fancy dinner spot, but it used to be stables, and there seems to be a ghost who still hangs out there and likes to play little pranks on the diners. Finally, we started our last morning on Sunday with another classic New York City food, bagels. I opted for a bagel breakfast sandwich, and Rick got an everything bagel with cream cheese so we could split them and try different things. We took our bagels to go and soaked up our last views of the city before we had to grab our bags and check out of the hotel. Finally, it was time to head back to the airport and catch our flight home. Overall, it was a magical time in New York City. While it was windy and cold, it wasn't as bad as I was expecting, and I feel we got really lucky with the weather in early December. I wouldn't hesitate to return to the city in December, and I even have a few ideas of things we need to add to our travel itinerary next time we're in the Big Apple. So please tell us, what should we plan to do next time we find ourselves in New York City, whether it's around Christmas time or not? Please tell us in the comments below, or feel free to check out our blog at backtothepassport.com for more travel-related content. Ciao!